start talking about the book. How does it feel to have two of the biggest e-commerce sites filing legal cases against each other to have the right to put out your book and sell your book?
The matter is sub judice, so I cannot comment on it.
I was noticing from in the acknowledgements that you have given a lot of acknowledgements to those who have helped you, your sister, who has helped you research the book, and a whole lot of people who have helped you market the book. Is this the future of creative writing? That marketing has taken over the centrality of the creative process?
No, I think perhaps the best way to answer this is to use a wonderful story that my professor in IIM Calcutta told me, my marketing professor. He'd said that you have to look at product and marketing in terms of an aircraft carrier. You guys have all seen aircraft carriers, right? Huge, thug, massive ships with planes that can take off on it. Now, even though an aircraft carrier is very long, it's still not long enough for a plane to gather enough speed to take off. You know how a plane takes off, right? Boyle's law. The air on top of the wings has to be faster than the air below. That's how you get the lift. That's how the plane takes off. You need a certain amount of distance for the plane to gather that speed. An aircraft carrier does not have that length, no matter how big the ship is. There's something called a propeller, which is attached to the plane at the bottom, which propels the ship, the plane. And that's how the plane takes off.
Your knowledge of physics seems to compete with the knowledge of mythology.
I'm a science graduate. I'm a science graduate. I love my wife and I. My wife's out there. She's a physics graduate. I'm a maths graduate. We both love science. Now, he said, look at the plane like the product and look at the propeller like marketing. Now, you might have the best plane in the world. You might have a freaking F Raptor. But if the propeller isn't working, the plane will not take off. It will fall into the sea. You might have the best propeller in the world, but if the engine in the plane is not working, it will still not take off. You need both the plane and the propeller to work. You need both the product and the marketing to work for the plane to take off, for the product to take off. At least that's how I believe it works. I'm a voracious reader. I read anywhere between 4 to 8 books per month. I can give you a long list of books which should have been bestsellers, but they are not because they weren't marketed properly. So you need both. You need good marketing and you need a good book. There's no either or.
What are you drinking?
Coffee. Huh? My publisher, they're slave drivers here. Where's Gautam? So he's kept me so busy for the last 2 weeks. I'm getting no sleep. I actually told the guy outside, please give me some coffee because I might just zonk off out here. He needs some coffee too.
No one.
Excuse me. Times of India, what's going on?
This is unfair.
This is discrimination.
Tell me, when I was a kid, we had this image of Ram. We grew up with this image of Ram, a gentle, vulnerable, at least from where I grew up, a gentle, vulnerable, charming young man who was done out of many of his rightful dues at various times in his life, and then went on to claim his rightful place in history. Yeah. And that Ram seems to have morphed over the decades into this huge, strong, macho, I would say, superhero, kind of big, bulky, muscular guy. I mean, even if you look at your book cover, a guy who's going out to conquer the world. How did the shift take place in the perception of Ram, and why do you think it took place?
Good question. There are many versions of the Ramayana. And in fact, the version that most North Indians think is the Ramayana is actually the Ramcharitmanas, not the original Valmiki Ramayana. If I ask most people out here, there's the coffee.
Thank you, Times of India. Thank you, Times of India.
No, we should thank Jagveer. Thanks, Jagveer. And Times of India. They're paying the bills, I think. If we ask most people out here, is the Lakshman Rekha mentioned in the Ramayana? I'm sure, since this is North India, I'm sure if we ask most people, they'll say yes.
It isn't.
In the Valmiki Ramayana, there is no Lakshman Rekha. There's no mention of the Lakshman Rekha. It's there in the Ramcharitmanas. Now, this is just one example. There are many like this. Why do people in North India believe this story? Because there was a television serial in the 1980s. It served its role. But the source material for that television serial happened to be the Ramcharitmanas. And that got imbibed in the minds of at least Maharashtra northwards as the Ramayana. In the original Valmiki Ramayana, there are a lot of times when Lord Ram is very vulnerable. There is a Jain version of the Ramayana in which Lord Ram is completely non-violent. He actually becomes a monk at the end, a Jain monk, a Jain version of the Ramayana. If I ask most people out here, did Lord Ram praise Ravan ever? Most people will say no. But if you go to, okay, you guys have heard the story of him sending Lakshman to, I know that's a popular story, but it's not in the Ramcharitmanas, it's not in the Valmiki Ramayana either, but it's a popular story. And I like that story, it's a good story. But if you read Kamba Ramayanam, which is the version that's popular in Tamil Nadu, there's a very famous scene out there where Lord Ram praises Ravan, Ravan praises Lord Ram, and then they go ahead and battle with each other. There's that version as well. There's a version of the Ramayana called the Adbhut Ramayana, which is very old. Historians tell us it's 1,000 years old. I believe it's probably a lot older. That's also credited to Valmiki ji. In that version, it's Sita Ma who kills the main Ravan. There are two Ravans. The elder Ravan is the main Ravan, and it's Sita Ma who kills the main Ravan, not Lord Ram. When Sita Ma takes her true form as Ma Kali, this version also exists. And I think what happens is, I think that's probably one of the strengths of India, is that we've always had this attitude, this liberalism, to modernize and localize our stories, the stories of our gods. Ramayana is just one example. You can see the Puranas, you can see the Mahabharata. There are so many versions that exist. And I think this is one of the secrets why our stories remain alive. Because we keep it alive. We somehow keep the soul of the old, we add in the new, and it gets revived once again. That's what Tulsidas ji did with the Ramcharitmanas. He modernized the Valmiki Rama into the idiom of the 16th century and made relevant to the North Indians, at least because he wrote it in Navadi. So he made it relevant to the North Indians of the 16th century once again. And that probably is a strength of our attitude. And that's why you see Lord Ram in so many different forms. Not just Lord Ram, Sita Ma, everyone.
But all the contemporary renderings have very largely simplified the Ramayana into Ram equals hero, Ravan equals villain syndrome. The East, from where I come, one of the greatest classics written by Michael Madhusoodan Dutt was Meghnad Baad Kavya, which was about Ravan's grief on the death of his son. In the East, Ravan is seen as a great hero, and Ram is seen, to many, by many, of course, as a common mortal. This is not to demean the common mortal, but the common mortal as an incandescent example of a great guy of that period. And Ravan was the tragic hero. In the South, Ravan is not a tragic hero. He is the hero of many versions, of many renderings of the entire Dravidian movement. The DK party grew on the belief that Ravan was misconstrued by Aryan historians and that he got a bad deal by everybody. Actually, he was the hero of the story. Why is it that all contemporary renderings from that move away from the original story and come out on television, come out in movies and other versions, other media, have simplified this tale into hero versus villain?
I think...
and do you intend to do it, since you've done only the first volume?
I think the interpretations that exist in a way reflect the mood of the times. If a society feels it is under attack, then the stories that emerge tend to go into a simple good and evil scenario, because you see yourself as having to fight someone who's perhaps destroying your culture. The maturity to accept shades of grey comes in a state of confidence. And this exists with individuals as well. An insecure person will probably not have the maturity to see the good even in his enemies and to see the bad even in himself. An insecure person will not be that way. A confident person will have that attitude. And as it is with individuals, so it is with societies as well. A confident society will have an open mind. The original Valmiki Ramayana is much more nuanced. And even in the Kamba Ramayana, of course, Lord Ram is the hero, of course. But Ravan's good points are also shown. It was Sone Ki Lanka because he administered it well. And I think that reflects the state of the society in which that version of the story emerged. If a society is confident, it tends to look at itself and its own stories with a sense of confidence. And confidence allows you to look at nuances. And I think that is the beauty of the Ramayana. If you actually get into the nuances of it, it's a very deep story, just like the Mahabharata. But to all those who are interested in mythology and philosophy, I would always suggest that my grandfather was a Pandit in Banaras, and he used to always say that our scriptures, it's like a library, it's like a graduation course. It's not just one thing to study. And the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the Puranas is like the entry level. It's the first standard. And the suggestion is to go deeper. Start with this, start with the various versions, but you go deeper. Go into the Aranyakas, go into the Brahmanas. Ideally go deeper and reach, the 12th standard or, the beginning of graduation with the Vedas, and then reach graduation level with the Upanishads. What you've done with the Isha Upanishad, that truly is the high point of our philosophy, the Upanishads. They are pure, deep philosophies. And I think it will be wonderful if we can explore that more and more, because the point of philosophy is to teach you how to live your life. It's not something esoteric which is just taught, in the humanities stream people who are so dumb that they can't get into any other subject, chal philosophy karke graduate kar le, kuch to degree le le. That's not how the approach to philosophy was in ancient times. Philosophy was like the first thing that you studied, not just in India, in ancient cultures across the world, the schools of mystery across the Hellenic world. The first subject you studied was philosophy. Learn how to live your life first, then specialize. And I think that's the way we should approach not just all the versions of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, but all our scriptures. We are encouraged to question in the traditional Indian way.
Are we an insecure society today?
I think we are becoming increasingly, slightly, I would say more confident. You have to see what the experience that we went through for the last 200, 300 years. At their peak, there weren't more than 100,000 British in India, at their peak. Now, just think about this. 100,000 British ruled 300 million Indians for 200 years. Okay, that's like a ratio of 3,000:1 over 200 years. Didn't someone think a ratio of 3,000:1, like, I think we can take them? What happened to us was not just a conquest. It is humiliation that is unparalleled in human history. It's like the equivalent of one company in Malaysia going to the US and then conquering California and then using Californians to conquer the rest of the US and running it for 200 years. It is that ridiculous what happened to us. Now, if a society goes through an experience like this, your confidence is shattered completely. And I think our journey towards confidence, I would suggest, began with 1991, when after many centuries we started experiencing success once again. The parameter for success in the modern world is economic success, and there was a time when conquest, violent conquest, was considered a parameter of success. In today's world, it's economic success. And slowly, as we become richer, you find that confidence is increasing more and more, which means we are debating more and more. There's nothing wrong with debates. We were always a highly argumentative society, always. We like to think we are compliant people. No, we are not. We have never been compliant people. We've always been extremely rebellious as a society. So I would actually see the last 30 years as a return of our historical confidence. Some of this efflorescence may come across as negative, yes, perhaps. Some of it could be positive, but I would suggest most of it is positive. जब मंथन होता है, आप सबने मंथन की कहानी सुनी है ना, समुद्र मंथन. जब मंथन होता है, पहले थोड़ा हलाल भी निकलता है, थोड़ा विष निकलता है, अंत में अमृत मिलता है. So this is a churning that's going on, and it's after 300 years of stagnation, 300 years of an absolute destruction of our culture by the British. I love what Amitav Ghosh has done with his books. I'm a big fan of his Ibis trilogy. Those of you who haven't read it, has everyone read Amitav Ghosh's Ibis trilogy? That's it. Rest of you who haven't, shame on you guys. Okay? Pick it up, because I think what he's done is extremely important. There is a story that all of us have forgotten. There are so many of us who like to actually think that the British, were overall good for us, and I find that surprising. Because what Amitav Ghosh has shown is that the British Raj was essentially built on the biggest drug running racket in the history of humanity. The only difference between Queen Victoria and Dawood Ibrahim was she wore a better headdress. As I read in a lovely, I read this, it's not my words, they're not my words, I read this in a lovely review of Flood of Fire by Souvik, the guy who wrote The Competent Authority. So I would actually suggest that the last 30 years has been a revival of our ancient way. It's a manthan that's going on. It's good. It's positive.
I notice that you don't, of course, consider the Mughal period as part of the colonization era.
I've written about it.
You've talked only about the British.
No, I've written about it. The Deccan Sultanate was, we must realize and we must accept it, was probably one of the bloodiest conquests, the Deccan Sultanate, ever. And the rulers were actually all Turks. There were no Indians among the ruling class, Muslims or Hindus. one can probably see that as colonial conquest. Akbar was different. Though Akbar was not of Indian origin, but he at least saw himself as Indian, at least from all available data. But the Deccan Sultanate was Turkish colonial rule. They're the same people who conquered
And you think that
China
there's a
and
qualitative
was a
difference
Yuan,
between the two?
the Yuan Empire was actually Turkic. The guys who conquered the Arab world, the sacking of Baghdad, which was the end of the Arab Golden Age, was also done by Turkic Mongols. The attack on Eastern Europe was also done by Turkic and Mongols. They were the people who in the 13th, 14th, 15th century carried out tremendous violence across the world, had conquered much of the world. India was one of the places that suffered a lot of this tremendous violence. That's a fact. What is that? The Turks have attacked. Even in Turkey, Turkey was actually Hellenic earlier. It's forgotten many times. The original Turks are actually from Central and Eastern Asia. They conquered Turkey, cleansed out much of the Hellenics, and that's how it became Turkey.
No, why I asked you whether we are an insecure society was because you talked of 300 years of domination. Ramanujan wrote about 300 Ramayanas. It was an incredible essay which talks about the multiplicities of the story, the multiplicity of narratives about the Ramayana, as well as the multiplicity of truths. And Delhi, Sagarika Ghosh called it the citadel of Indian current culture.
What is that? Yeah?
That's
Sorry?
the anticipation of the. That's anticipation for audience actually. Audience wants to ask many questions. So after this answer, we'll start with the question
I
answer.
thought you were going to get some drums on board and I have to start. That'll be fun though. Sorry.
Yeah. So Delhi University had it as the Ramanujan essay as additional reading. There was a huge protest against it, and it was taken off. It went up to the Supreme Court. The court ruled. It was decided that the essay will stay, but then the decision was taken to take it off. Are we, in effect, rejecting the multiplicity of narratives about the Ramayana?
There are decisions that get taken by universities.
It's a civilizational.
What is
this is really a civilizational
sure.
issue.
Yeah.
It's not just
What
a
I would-
university.
No, as a point I would like to make is, for example, Brandeis University, and we are, Times of India is calling INRC Ali out here. Brandeis University in the US had decided to call Ayan Hirsi Ali for a program, and they were going to honor her. There were some protests by students and some of the faculty in there, and that invitation was rescinded. Now, what processes work within a university for such decisions to get taken, either in Brandeis or in Delhi University, is best judged by the universities themselves. My suggestion would be that we shouldn't look at Brandeis University as taking back of the invitation to honor Ayan Hirsi Ali as a perspective on the American approach to freedom of expression. And I would suggest the same thing out here. What happened in Delhi University or in Brandeis University is a reflection, positive or negative, on those universities. It's not a reflection on US or India. Because if you want to, you can still read Ayan Hirsi Ali's book in the US. You can still read the 300 Ramayans in India as well. It's available on the web. So my suggestion would be that, look at the country as a whole. My submission would be on the issue of freedom of expression. I'm not saying India is perfect, but India is pretty much ahead of most countries in the world, and specifically looking at the people of India. Our laws, it can be debated, especially the First Amendment, and the First Amendment is what actually drastically curtailed our freedom of expression, which was passed in 1951. Our original constitution was, under 1A, gave absolute unfettered freedom of expression. The First Amendment curtailed it. Besides, not just the freedom of expression rights, but even right to property, various other rights were curtailed in the First Amendment in 1951. And I've written an article on this issue where I've said that all of us who call ourselves liberal must campaign for the First Amendment to be repealed. Why it was passed in 1951, one can debate. Maybe the government at that time felt that it was needed for stability. One shouldn't judge what happened in 1951, but at least as of now, I think we should repeal it. But let's look at how people approach the issue of freedom of expression. In India, what is the worst that happens if someone does not like your book or a movie? They'll probably file a court case against you. They'll probably burn a poster of a movie. They'll probably break some glass. That's about it.
In my part of the country, they'll come and blacken your face.
Yes, okay. But no one lands up at a house with an AK-47. That happens in Europe. That happens in the Middle East. That happens in Pakistan. Doesn't happen in the US, doesn't happen in India. I'm not saying any country is perfect as far as freedom of expression is concerned, but I would venture that in terms of the attitude of the people, India and the US are probably among the most open to freedom of expression, the most open to accepting a different point of view. Our laws need to catch up with the people. That I would agree. The First Amendment needs to be repealed. But I would venture that our people are actually pretty damn liberal. And by liberalism, I mean the ability to accept someone else's right to a different point of view.
So 300 Ramayanas and 300 versions of stories about Ram, each one has the right to exist in its own.
But each one does exist already. If you go to Tamil Nadu, the version of the Ramayana that is popular, the version of the Ramayana that they believe is the Ramayana, is the Kamba Ramayanam. In the East, as you said correctly, there is another version of the Ramayana which they believe. In the North, if I ask most of you people out here who's elder, Lord Ganesh or Lord Karthik, what will everyone say? Lord Karthik. You go to the South, who's elder? Lord Ganesh. In the North, Lord Karthik is seen as a bachelor god. In fact, often women don't even enter his temple. In the South, Lord Karthik has two wives, Valli and Sena. And all these multiplicities, all these various versions of the truth, they coexist. And that is the beauty of India. There's a lovely... I'll end with one line. There's this lovely line in the Rig Veda, which I think represents our attitude, from the Asya Vamasya hymn. Ekam sata vipraha bahuda vadanti. Truth is one, but the wise men speak it as many.
Well said.